I've been teaching in college classrooms for 20 years, and there's something that I've noticed that I want to share with you today. Let me paint the scene. It's 2005, and I'm teaching at The Ohio State University. I'm a new teacher, and I'm young, and I'm insecure, so I like to arrive in my classroom early. I arrange the space, I sort my papers, I might write something on the board. And before long, students trickle in. It's Ohio State, so often they're chatting about football. But on a good day, they might be chatting about a novel chapter that I've assigned. Maybe a student thinks that a character made a terrible choice. And another student is like, no way, that character made a great choice. And so they're debating and they start joking around and they're laughing. And then it's time for class to begin. About 10 years ago, things started to change. Smartphones became ubiquitous, and they started to find their way into my classroom. But they mostly stayed in purses and bags, and the impact on my teaching was minimal. Fast forward to 2025. Approximately 90% of teens currently owns a smartphone, and 1 in 3 9-year-olds have them. Teens are spending upwards of 8 hours a day on screens, and that's for entertainment, so that's not including schoolwork and homework. Nearly 50% of teens say that they are online almost constantly. So those few minutes before my class actually starts, they look really different now. I still arrive early, my students still trickle in, but rather than chatting, more often they go to their desk and they sit down and they start scrolling on their phone. And many days, the classroom is eerily silent. How is the classroom of 2025 different from the classroom of 20 years ago? 20 years ago, my students were more likely to know one another's names. They were more likely to know what sports or instruments one another played, and they made considerably more eye contact. As a teacher, it was easier to get a lively discussion going because my students were already in the habit of conversing with one another. We've all seen this change take place at the societal level. You go to a restaurant, you see friends out to dinner, and instead of talking with one another, they're looking at their phones. Sometimes I see my mom poking at her phone while her grandson waves a piece of art around, trying to get her attention. Maybe I'm describing you. You're in a meeting or a class, and it's a little boring, so you just pull out your phone to see what's going on. Or you're in a socially awkward situation, and it feels easier to scroll than to persevere. I'm describing myself. On a Friday night, after a long day of work, I come home, I put the kids to bed, I crash on the sofa, and I scroll the news instead of talking about the news with my husband. So I think we can agree that the ways we socialize have changed. But so what? Isn't this the same as it's ever been? Technology is always advancing. The ways we socialize are always changing. Isn't this just another case of the older generation not really getting the younger? Probably the kids are okay, right? I'm not sure that's the case. And I'm worried because my students tell me that they're worried. Now, the students I teach have complex and nuanced understandings of technology. And they are very quick to tell me that social media is a great platform for keeping in touch with friends. and it's a great place to explore niche interests. And we can all agree that smartphones are incredibly useful and convenient, and that is part of the picture. But that's not the whole picture. Because the students I talk to, and I teach 150 Gen Z students each year, they're telling me that they're worried about the impact of social media on teen mental health. They're worried about how social media contributes to political polarization. They worry that they're addicted to their phones. And they talk about things like brain rot and attention fragmentation. And sometimes they tell me that they don't feel like their conversational skills are where they'd like them to be. As a teacher, I'm worried about the documented declines in literacy levels and in empathy. And here's the thing, my students and I were not outliers because 80% of smartphone users under 30 worry that they use their phones too much. So what do we do? Too often, the members of my generation put the burden for change on the shoulders of the young. Get off your phone, quit the social media, make a study schedule. And that advice is fine, but it's not enough. Because the Gen Z folks I talk to, they're already tech savvy and proactive. They're already using app timers and quitting the most addictive social media websites. And they're already doing things like taking tech fasts. So what we need is collective action, because it's hard to change the culture through individuals opting out. And quite frankly, it's hard to get a lively conversation going if you're the only one in the room who's not looking at a phone. So what can we do as teachers, as community leaders, young and not so young, and as parents, to create more opportunities for the younger generations to engage in authentic conversation? Luckily, the solution to this is really easy. Teachers, make your classrooms phone free. And when you can, if you can, make activities screen free. Your students will make more eye contact with one another. They will get better at reading facial expressions and body language. Students will get to know one another better as people, and classroom discussions will naturally become livelier, last longer, and be richer. Students, follow the research. Research tells us that the presence of a smartphone on your desk, even if that smartphone is on silence, even if that smartphone belongs to somebody else, it impairs your ability to pay attention. If you want to go to a lecture and remember what the lecturer said, or if you want to complete a complex task and do it with a minimum of errors, research tells us the best place for your smartphone is in another room. I try to run my classes phone-free, and what I can tell you is this. If you give students the opportunity to interact authentically and to really get to know one another, your classroom community will flourish. Community leaders, young and not so young. Create opportunities for authentic conversation. Organize a phone-free hike, organize a phone-free dinner party, organize a phone-free game night. Just like trains have quiet cars, imagine if college campuses had screen-free social lounges that were designed for real-life conversation. Imagine an expert professor talking excitedly with interested students in a distraction-free environment away from the pressure of grades and assessment. Imagine students with different political opinions intentionally coming together to talk through those differences rather than posting those differences on social media. These are important and achievable visions, and anyone here can create these kinds of opportunities. I have a 10-year-old daughter, and she started a knitting circle in our neighborhood. And now, once a month, about a dozen tweens gather in our apartment, and they knit and they talk for hours, and it's all screen-free. Parents. I will keep this short because I'm a parent, and I know that we get way too much advice these days. But there's one thing I want to share with you, because each year I ask my students this question. If you had kids one day, and you were thinking about how you would set boundaries around screen use, would you be as strict as your parents were, more strict than your parents were, or less strict than your parents were? Each year, about half of my students say that they would be as strict as their parents. And about half say that they would be more strict. And I've never had a student say that they would be less strict. So parents and future parents, if your 5-year-old or your 13-year-old complains because you ask them to put their iPad or their smartphone away, stay strong. Because one day, that future college student is going to look back and thank you.